All right, 80% of everybody has now left. It's just us. How is everybody doing? Okay, so this is Carl Jung's Black Books, part 28 on chicken philosophy. If you'd like to start at the beginning with part 1, it's an option. Or you can jump in and see what we're talking about today. It's always different, usually. All right, let's get to it. Go with some jar today. Cheers. Okay, we're finishing up this section. The lectures went hand in hand with his regular participation at Eranos, conferences in Ascona. Established in 1933 by Olga Frobe-Kapteyn. The conferences ran for 2 weeks each year. They focused on the history of religion and culture, with a particular emphasis on the relation between East and West. Jung advised Frobe-Kapteyn concerning themes and speakers to invite, but was careful to avoid the conferences becoming simply a vehicle for his school. Scholars who participated in the conferences included Henry Corbin, Heinrich Zimmer, Victor White, T.D. Suzuki, Ernesto Buonaiuti, that's how you pronounce that one, Giuseppe Tucci, Wilhelm Hauser, Louis Massignon, you can go get some coffee or whatever, some French fries from the nearby McDonald's. We're going to be listing a lot of names for the next while. Gilles Quispel, Erwin Rauselli, Mircea Eliade, Paul Radin, Louis Massignon, Karl Karenyi, and Adolf Portman. An unfortunate surname, that one. Less popular than it used to be, isn't it? They served as an informal peer group and a critical audience to whom Jung's works from the mid-1930s were addressed. The comparative study of the individuation process with which he was engaged required the collaboration of experts in the field of comparative religion. On the other hand, for many of these scholars, the links that he was trying to establish between psychology and their fields of expertise opened the possibility of unexpected applications of their work outside the confines of academia. In conclusion, a conclusion. Cool. We're getting somewhere. In conclusion, the Black Books provide a unique window into the creative process of a major psychologist. At a textual level, they enable one to follow how Jung's scholarly reading provided resources that inspired his fantasy, moving him to imagine in a mythic way. By reflecting on these resources, he attempted to divine broad insights from them, first cast in a lyrical form in Liber Novus, and subsequently in conceptual and theoretical forms in his scholarly writings. As a document humane and psychological record, the Black Books chart Jung's attempt to resolve the 20th century crisis of meaning in his own person, and distill from this a means through psychotherapy for others to do likewise. In short, the Black Books and Liber Novus together form the core of analytical psychology and enable its historical genesis to be studied from its inception. Jung's work may now be seen in the round and in the intimate connections between the esoteric visionary cycles and the exoteric psychology may be grasped. Jung later recalled that his, quote, entire life consisted in elaborating what had burst forth from the unconscious like an enigmatic stream and threatened to break me. Everything later was merely the outer classification. The scientific elaboration, the integration into life, but the numinous beginning, which contained everything, was then, end quote. Thus, the black books enable one to enter the private laboratory of analytical psychology and follow the genesis of a visionary science. That is, how a psychology was born of the visionary imagination, which in turn could form a science of visions. So we're finished with this whole thing. That was all one thing. Now we're moving to whatever's next. Editorial note is what's next. Sonu Shamdasi, the same person who's been writing all along. The Black Books was the designation that Jung gave to the notebooks in which he recorded his self-experimentation between 1913 and 1932. The appellation, quote, black, end quote, refers to the fact that with the exception of the first one, which has a brown cover, they have black covers. Jung's singular designation indicates that he regarded those notebooks as an integral whole. They have subsequently been referred to in the plural as the Black Books. In this edition, we use the designation, quote, the Black Books, period, end quote. These were numbered together with Jung's adolescent diary, quote, parentheses, it appears that someone other than Jung numbered them, end parentheses. Hence, the present sequence starts with Book 2. The first entries in Book 2 represent the continuation of Jung's adolescent diary and run to 1902. Interesting, because this is Book 1, but it's all just talking about what we're going to be jumping into in Book 2. Makes sense. So Book 1 is missing, I guess. I don't know. Yes. All right. Oh, okay. So the edition here starts with page 4. As those entries properly belong in the context of the adolescent diary, they have not been reproduced here. After the lengthy interval of more than a decade, Jung took up Book 7 to record notes of a different kind. Those have not been reproduced here. Well, there's a lot missing, apparently. Thus, this edition presents the entirety of the entries from 1913 to 1932 in a facsimile edition on a one-on-one scale, forming a complete account of the period of Jung's self-experimentation. Each volume contains the facsimile of the book in question, followed by a translation with notes. The front matter, introduction, translator's notes, image appendix, and index have been placed in this volume, which maintains the consistency of the numbering. With the reproduction of the text, the indentation of paragraphs has been regularized. Where missing quotation marks have been added, they have been indicated by square brackets, okay? Jung's underlinings have been maintained. Illegible letters have been indicated by, quote, XX, end quote, and words or letters crossed out have been indicated by a strike-through. When it has been possible to substitute a partially begun word in German with an English equivalent, this has been done. Otherwise, it has been left as, quote, XX, end quote. The break from one page to the next in the facsimile is indicated in the next of the translation by a slash between bracketed page numbers and corresponding to the original notebook pages. With the material from November 12, 1913 to June 6, 1916, which was subsequently taken up in Liber Novus, most of the significant changes have been indicated in the footnotes to aid comparison. Page numbers for Liber Novus have been given to a reader's edition. Translations have been revised in places. Translations from Jung's collected works have at times been modified. Unless otherwise specified, dates and details concerning Jung's activities are from his appointment book and information from the Jung family archives, courtesy of Andreas Jung and Suzanne Eggenberger Jung. Makes me hungry. Next section. Translating Jung's runes. Auspicious music starting for this. Martin Leibscher, John Peck, and Sonu Shamdasani. In the autumn of 1917, Jung's soul forces the black magician, Ha, to read and explain a series of cryptic runes that he had sent. The resulting entries, which include 8 sets of inscribed rune shapes from one of the most challenging sections of this work to translate, and required constant triangular comparisons between the runes, the German text, and the English translation. At the same time, they may stand as a cipher for the complexities of translating this work as a whole. In response to the request of Jung's soul, Ha takes on the task of translating the runes, literally spelling them out. It is a boot camp in Code City. He gives cues to Jung's soul about how this or that shape corresponds to the sun, or a roof, or a tilted passageway, or even how one ought to feel physically while narrating this curve or that crevice. Progression links these elements, but no narrative does. Hidden meaning lurks nowhere. The signified is contained within the signifier. The semantics are contained in the syntax, while the tour guide's urgency, though palpable, remains helpless to indicate anything more. Long before Marshall McLuhan, the medium was the message. Ha's patient, entirely posture-centered coaching of Jung's soul looks less to the meaning of signs and more to a yoga, according to the shapes of the runes. Among these appear a serpent, sticks with schematic little heads, and a modest sun. Neither Nordic Germanic runes nor Egyptian hieroglyphs command the field, but something other. This language has never been taught before, even during the first 4 years or so of Jung's experiment. Now that it arrives, however, it is transmodal, quasi-pictographic, I think that says. Yes. And in Jung's nomenclature, runic. Ha's sentences themselves are not difficult. The difficulty lies in grasping what is actually going on. Throughout, one senses Ha's urgency that these visitors be able to assimilate the meaning, partly registered in these runes, but also active among a small guild of magicians, himself and Philemon, with Ka linking them as Ha's soul and Philemon's shadow. Already, the perceptions we must manage frame hybrid categories. Ka, as Philemon's shadow, emerges freestanding in his dealings with Ha, the black magician. But of course, that helps to articulate a reading of Philemon's character. So we are learning how to read character against a particular psychic background. In this case, Jung's own dramatis personae manifesting to him as real factors, as Elijah had admonished him earlier that they were real, not symbols, as well as a cosmos that seeds itself between the tips of the world-creating cones, as is spelled out in the runes. While Jung himself keeps pace with this, nonetheless, his impressions of the show, or his first take on an exchange or a brush with some disconcerting fact, frequently surpasses his initial powers of assimilation. In letters dated September 13 and October 10, 1917, Jung wrote to Sabina Spielrein, commenting on the significance of certain hieroglyphs in a dream she had sent him, saying that, quote, "With your hieroglyphics we are dealing with phylogenetic engrams of an historic symbolic nature," end quote, referring to the contempt meted out, the contempt, unless he means content and it's a typo, I don't know, noted out to transformations and symbols of the libido by the Freudians. Oh, it must be contempt. He described himself as, quote, clinging to his runes, which he would hand over to those who would not understand them. In meeting the Freudian objections to the view Jung took of such intermediating symbols, he points to the price paid for harvesting. It is the wound, quote, inflicted by oneself, end quote, parentheses, or deeply acknowledged by oneself. The same, in effect, end parentheses. Our meditation on translation in the Black Books arrives at this auto-sacrificial turn, where the intention to carry one's own suffering devotedly becomes the task and the mystery. Carrie Baines reports Jung in 1922 evoking the image of the runes to stand pars pro toto, right? Pars pro toto? Yes. For much of what he sought to understand and convey through, pars pro total? So is that part from total? I don't know. You have to speak Latin to read this book. All right. Convey through his encounter with the depths. Quote, "Much of your material, you said, has come to you as runes, and the explanation of those runes sounds like the veriest nonsense, but that does not matter if the end product is sense. Il fine justifica I mezzi," right? Giustifica. I don't know why I always make that in. Never mind. End quote. The sense was the new hermeneutic to which the runes eventually gave rise. The skeptic scoffs at runes, objecting that whatever projections one might bring to such symbols, they are arbitrary. Yet a handful resemble certain bodily postures or stances, which could be described as a form of rune yoga. One justifiably supposes, however, that Jung's respect for their shapes is warranted, if only because the myth about their origin in Wotan's sacrifice of himself to himself casts them as a donum Dei, a gift of God, I presume, emerging as they do in his own active imagination with Ha. Translation from a runic primal layer gives weight to these symbols as basic to the human psyche. Rune yoga, in this light, emerges from the Black Books as a means to sort out such autonomous creative psychic events. Such events are difficult to understand, but the burden of misunderstanding is greater. A symbol in rune yoga is nearly the same as what it pictures, once it is understood as the mimicry of the right attitude on the levels of both spirit and instinct, both being archaically rooted. Ezra Pound's Chinese ideograms connect with Jung's runes only for a moment. Across a wide, swift stream, Jung's magic/runic dialect has no home among the living. The magician's black rod becomes Jung's Hermes wand, an aid in navigating the way of life redeemed from redeemers, or saved from salvation. The signs, unlike, quote, the solid letter, end quote, in Holderlin's, quote, Parmos, end quote, a poem long close to Jung's heart, bring up their own dark ground with them. As translators of this work, we continually found that we could not confine ourselves to the text, but needed to grasp the referent as a dimension. In that sense, we rejected Jacques Derrida's, quote, "Il n'y a pas de hors texte," end quote, "there is no outside the text," end quote, end parentheses. How could we pretend that Jung was not consistently compelled to venture forth into the visionary imagination, his language often seeming makeshift under the circumstances? If he had constantly needed to poke through the hermeneutic circle, how could we, as his translators, not also bear witness to the exchange between his "I," in quotes, his soul, and the numerous denizens of the depths? In something akin to a reiterative act of imagining, we needed constantly to try to enter into Jung's imaginal world to envisage what was transpiring, and to have his present moment in our minds as a third space between German and English. What was called for throughout our collaboration was an attainment to the twilight world of Jung's imaginings, followed by figuring how to return to the world of contemporary English, so as to convey faithfully both this text and its fluctuating hors text, that's HRS hyphen TEXTE, hors text, it must be French. Translation is always about carrying meaning somewhere else in a way that both keeps it the same and renders it different. Parentheses, Latin translatio, lifting something up and elsewhere. Oh. End parentheses. If we engage a text sufficiently, then we find that we are getting there by also staying here. To modify Gertrude Stein's quip, there's no there. The first there being in quotes, the second being italics. Only because it's manifesting here. This coming to in the light about the translateral or translational, translation with a hyphen, in play, which confessed or official translation routinely declares, may be the psychological achievement behind the manifestation in Old Norse, first among the Western European languages, of the I form of speech around 400 Common Era. This was developed not by shortening the end of words and shuttling the personal element forward, as in Latin and Greek, but by asserting the freestanding pronoun. That's interesting. Assessing the psychological significance of this linguistic change means weighing shifts in perspective and also access to inwardness. The Austrian refugee, intellectual Franz Borkenau, attributed this shift to a combination of primordial instinct and intellectual effort. Yet the shift itself, which occurred in other Northern European languages, made all those languages intensely psychological, while also drawing their speakers for the first time into the first-person singular. What then might Jung's psychology have owed, during its original development in the Black Books, to this subtle transformation of the German language itself, with his striking looks over the shoulder to both Gnostic, Alexandrian, Greek, and Latin? Both Gnostic, Alexandrian, Greek, that's one, and Latin is two. Okay, makes sense. As well as to Old Norse, the third thing, the runes and magic. What? All right. Yes. Yeah, okay, that's a sentence. Okay, sorry. As for what translators do, you are sacrificing yourself for someone else's voice and thrust, even if they are dead. Not because you cannot write, but because you can sense the spirit in their effort and feel drawn to giving it your own blood, your bit of sacrifice. With Jung's crucial experiment, we noticed that he sweats the chance that it might not be effective, that working with his interlocutors and unpredictable and vexing, but then suddenly meaningful beyond measure, and that these proportions and no others deliver efficacy, making what he could never make alone. Most of all, one translates its in recognition of the effectiveness given the living by the dead. We acknowledge a mythic act as our model. In the archaic Greek nekia, the blood sacrifice poured into a pit to extract the buzzing spirits of the dead, parentheses, quote, blood for the ghosts, end quote, in Pound's phrase, for his own appreciation of Homeric practice, end parentheses. To get to this zone is to lift and carry alertly and nakedly, but also to fall under Jung's influence. Our sensibilities were affected to a degree that others might find peculiar. Near the beginning of our enterprises, one of us wrote in his journal, "Sensation today of the work once again coursing through my veins, mediumistic feeling, giving myself over to it, my voicing, my verbal articulation, the voice of the dead, of the shades, the presences that will enter the public stage through the medium of my pen, my language. Speak, indeed, you dead. Receive my libations. Resound forth once more." That feels like a good place to end. Wow, I did like nothing but read today. So many of these episodes I am at least half just talking. So today was a little different. It's been a roller coaster for me today, and I can't quite explain why. But I think I've arrived at an all right place on the roller coaster. That's neither here nor there. But if you're interested, I would like to invite you to check out something I put up recently. Did I already tell you about... I think I already told you about the round table. So instead of that, or in addition to that, no round table. I'm going to assume I told you about the round table last time, and now we're down to 2% of the viewers. So you are very special to me. Know that. So Larry the Librarian and Larry the Librarian Analysis and Commentary. Larry the Librarian is a straight recital of the last chapter of one of my books. It's a short story, really, but it's connected to a lot of the other short stories. And then the analysis and commentary. So I'm going to throw those up on the screen right now. You can choose. Up above, you've got the recital. Down below, you've got the explanation. You don't have to hear the recital before the explanation, but you might prefer to do that. And have a great day.